So much to talk about regarding the great escape. But let's start in Parliament. The South African authorities should hang their heads in shame. That's what members of Parliament's Justice and Correctional Services Committee told police management today in the ongoing inquiry into the Thabo Bester prison escape. National Police Commissioner Fani Masemola claims that prison management company G4S was uncooperative in the SAPS investigation. But Judicial Inspector for Correctional Services, retired Justice Edwin Cameron, painted a picture of a process bungled by all parties. eNCA's Aviwe Mtila has been following proceedings in Cape Town and joins us now. Good evening to you, Aviwe. And of course, we're just on a half-an-hour dinner break. It's by no means over. What an astonishing day. It started with Justice Edwin Cameron. He, of course, is head of what is known as JICS, which is the Judicial Inspectorate on Correctional Services. And he was very frank and very open about a number of failings and delays. Tell us more.
They knew all along, says Justice Cameron, in fact suggesting that they chose to close their eyes on it, turn a blind eye. Those are the officials that were, of course, supposed to be looking at that escape of Thabo Bester, of course, dating back on the 3rd of May. The suggestion is from the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services is that as early as July, when those DNA results is when the police knew, them as the JICS knew around the 10th of August when they were furnished with that post-mortem as well as the DNA results confirming that in fact it's not Bester that died in that fire. In fact, the autopsy, remember, it came out just a day after that staged death on the 3rd of May. On the 4th, the autopsy was out suggesting that that person couldn't have been Bester, and in fact the body that was found inside that cell, charred body, was already dead by the time that it got there. So the suggestion is that while the SAPS furnished the JICS with this information, the suggestion was that it needed to be kept mum. In fact, they needed to do several investigations and look into this matter thorough. But of course, after panicking, even suggesting that he wrote an email, that's Justice Cameron, to the Minister of Correctional Services, Ronald Lamula, on the 26th of October, another email again on February that basically got no response. He suggests that sometime in September, he then let Ground Up know about all of what was going on, and they did the investigations. Hence, now we are where we are, where, of course, it broke out the news of that elaborate escape. In fact, let's take a listen to some of what Justice Cameron had to say as he opened up today's proceedings and the inquiry.
So we now jump a month into the future to the 9th of March this year. Were there any other interactions with DCS? Here you again warn of Bester being alive and well and dangerous. Why was this warning made on the 9th of March again?
So, I think this committee yesterday expressed the sense of peril and outrage, which is appropriate to this matter, and we weren't seeing evidence of it. I'm not saying that the Commissioner or either the National Commissioner of Police or the National Commissioner of Corrections or any of the executive officials in government, I'm not saying they didn't feel that urgency, but it wasn't being evidenced to us. So it was an attempt to om vuur onder hulle agterwêrelde te maak, to put a fire into the responses.
Then I just want to know, in all the meetings that you had with G4S throughout this episode, at what stage did you tell them that the body they recovered that was recovered from C35 was in fact not the body of Bester? I know the original, they said that officially they were informed, but I want to know the first time that they were told in a meeting.
They knew long beforehand, as your question implies, Honourable Mr. Engelbrecht, long before, but were closing their eyes to it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it is astonishing that G4S, up until literally, I think, this week, has said no, it was Bester in that cell. It's like they just didn't want it to be true that he had not died but had, in fact, escaped. We've also, of course, heard from the police minister, and just a little earlier this evening, we heard from the Justice and Correctional Services Minister, Ronald Lamola, who did apologise for the escape. But he said he won't resign because he said he did pick up the phone as soon as Justice Cameron phoned him and said, this is terrible, what's going on. Spoke to the National Police Commissioner. All round a picture of a lack of urgency, not pushing hard enough to deal with this. Did you find that there was any clear moment to really explain why this astonishingly pressing matter of a rapist and murderer on the loose was dealt with a very kind of, it seems almost a relaxed approach?
A very relaxed approach, Sally. In fact, something that, as you mentioned, that Ronald Lamola, the Correctional Services Minister, did apologize for. In fact, he says while he didn't receive any email, well, has no recollection of any email from Justice Cameron, he did have that phone call conversation. Then soon thereafter had that conversation with the National Commissioner of Correctional Services, where a number of things were furnished to him. One was what you mentioned also around G4S, mentioning that the deceased was indeed Thabo Bester, something that they changed the tune to just recently, some week or so to. The other was, of course, that the police were asking that this be kept mum because there are a number of investigations that are currently being happening. In fact, those investigations are not only of the Bester escape, but we also found out that, for example, Dr. Nandipha Makutumana took 3 bodies out of the morgue. That's before this elaborate escape. One of them, we do understand, taken on the 8th of April, found on the 9th of April, with still that tag from the mortuary in that deceased person. Some of these revelations that we are now coming to know of. But of course, those pointed questions continued. Let's take a listen to Ronald Lamola, the minister there, as he responds to why there was this lax and relaxed approach.
But I also asked him, but if indeed this guy is true that it's not him and so forth, he said no, there's complications. So I asked, what are these complications? He said no. The first one is that G4S is insisting that the person who died on that day is Thabo Bester. So I said, okay, that's one, I get it. But the judge, I mean, if the judge is raising this thing, I suspect that there's something. And then he said, no, the second complication is that there is an ongoing police investigation by SAPS, which they have informed him that we must not do anything that might jeopardize the investigation. So I said, but what are those things they're dealing with? Because, I mean, if we're dealing with a straightforward escape, I don't see what is the complication. They can just go arrest this person that is suspected to be this guy and test this person. Then he says, no, the problem is that they have informed him that this is broader than just an escape. There's multiple bodies, there's a suspension of a scheme, there's a huge network that is being investigated that might be alerted with any process that might jeopardize the investigation. I then said to the National Commissioner, then that's fine, but let's find a way to prioritize, check the matter and follow it up.
Okay, so that's the explanation as to why things were kept under wraps for so long, that they suspected this was a massive network. Of course, a lot of the, that statement was to a certain extent challenged because we know that the victims, Thabo Bester's victims, were not informed and warned. And the point made time and time again that the South African public should have been alerted to this escape, as it tends to happen. We generally know when there's been a prison break. But I mean, the details coming out are truly astonishing. 3 dead bodies now that were in contention for being put in the cell to masquerade as Thabo Bester. There are so many astonishing details coming out. It's actually hard to keep up. I would imagine, though, that might cut out the murder charge that we know is being put to Dr. Nandipa Magudumana's father, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Talk to us about the grilling from Glynis. I mean, Glynis Breitenbach has been on fire these last 2 days, and she really locked horns with the police minister in particular. Just take us through that interaction.
Certainly on fire, Sally, the last 2 days. Glynis Breitenbach, of course, the DA spokesperson, when it comes to the Justice Committee, pointing out some key issues, some of which you've already touched on. Of course, South African public, and I guess more importantly, the victims of Thabo Bester, not notified the minute that the police knew that, in fact, this was not a suicide, it was an escape. And I mean, it's something that you'd think that would be at the top of the mind. This is a serial killer, Sally, and a rapist that is on the loose. So that you'd expect to be at the core. Never mind that, already a number of crimes that the police knew of, for example, regarding Dr. Nandipa Magudumana, these 3 bodies that have been taken from the morgue. The questions were, why wasn't any of this acted upon? I mean, you know that she's conducting these alleged crimes. Surely she should have been taken in for questioning. So those heated encounters and interactions were quite pointed and, with some fury in their nature. In fact, I want you to take a listen to one of those interactions, especially between Glynis Breitenbach and the police minister, Becky Tan.
Please don't lecture me on what the police do and don't do. I know what they do, I know what they don't do. I did it for years. You can teach me nothing about police investigations, with respect. Secondly, and I'm glad you take the point, and I'm glad that you concede it, it's an absolute disgrace that the victims of this man were not warned, were not prepared, were not protected. It's an absolute disgrace, and you should hang your head in shame, all of you. It's no way to treat people. But the most important thing is, answer me this. If while you were so busy protecting the secrecy of your investigation and deciding not to warn the South African public, who incidentally expect all of us here to protect them, and we've all failed, all of us. If Bester had murdered another woman, had raped another woman, what would you have said then?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is the DA's Glynis Breitenbach there. We don't know what Thabo Bester has been doing in the months since he managed to escape and stay under the radar. So Aviwe is going to be heading back into that parliamentary committee session, which is due to get underway, I think, in another 5 to 10 minutes. We will, of course, take that live once it starts again. Thank you so much, eNCA's Aviwe Mtila in Cape Town. But of course,